As you are able, please rise for the invocation and then remain standing for the presentation of colors following. Let us pray. Lord of all creation, we gather on this 81st anniversary of D-Day in remembrance. We remember with respect and admiration men who, given impossible jobs, accomplished them. We remember the valor, fidelity, and sacrifice of men who were very frightened and exceedingly brave at the same time. We remember their willingness to die in a great crusade, and we remember with profound gratitude those who did pay the ultimate price for victory, whose names are preserved on the wall encompassing this plaza. We remember and we give thanks. We acknowledge that there are lessons to be gleaned from the legacy of these thousands of names about the costs of freedom, about the need to defend liberty, about the meaning of service beyond self. May we take these lessons fully to heart and never let them fade from our memory. May we, each of us, embrace our role as stewards of freedom, not merely recipients of it. Remind us of our obligations as citizens of a free nation. Help us to not only observe injustice, but to oppose it. And hasten that day, that good and pleasant day when all brethren will indeed dwell together in blessed unity. Guard and bless our country's military forces wherever they may be at this moment. Keep them in your care. Strengthen and uphold their families. Grant them your peace. And now, as this commemoration proceeds, we humbly ask your blessing upon it and upon all who are assembled here. Lord, in your mercy, hear our prayer. Amen.
seated. On behalf of the Board of Directors, staff, and volunteers of the National D-Day Memorial Foundation, I am pleased to welcome each of you to the National D-Day Memorial on this 81st anniversary of the Allied landing in Normandy. Today we are pleased to welcome a number of distinguished guests from abroad, including Lieutenant Colonel Gaznier, military attaché from the Embassy of France, who will be speaking at the sculpture homage immediately after the ceremony. Nicholas Kudinev and representatives from the NATO Allied Command Transformation in Norfolk, Defense Cooperation Attaché Lieutenant Colonel Jan Novotny from the Embassy of the Czech Republic. Closer to home, a special thank you to the Honorable Glenn Youngkin, Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, who you will hear from shortly. We know how busy you are, Governor, and appreciate your presence here at the memorial. We are also honored to have Major General Ring with us today, the 29th Adjutant General of Virginia, Major General Craig Crenshaw, Secretary of Veterans and Defense Affairs of Virginia, and award-winning historian and author Joe Balkowski. We are also joined by a number of state legislators, including Senator Mark Peake, Delegates Eric Zayer, Tim Griffin, and Wendell Walker, who will assist with Lane Reese. We are also joined by local town and county elected officials and other representatives who are with us today. Thank you for your presence. Thank you also to Congressman Morgan Griffin, who spoke yesterday on the House floor in Washington, D.C., regarding the memorial, D-Day, and its importance. We are honored and humbled to have you all here today for this special remembrance. We are especially excited to welcome a very special group. Our most highly distinguished guests are World War II veterans. It means a great deal to all of us that you are here to take part in today's commemoration, and we look forward to recognizing each of you individually later in the program. You are truly an inspiration for us all. Now, I understand our youngest World War II Thank you. I understand our youngest World War II representative here today is 98, and our oldest joining us is 105. I think we can all agree that deserves another round of applause. Thank you. As a U.S. Navy veteran and chairman of the National D-Day Memorial Foundation, I am particularly appreciative of the history of D-Day and the complexity of the planning that went into preparations for the invasion. Its success hinged not only on the combined efforts of the Army, Army Air Forces, Coast Guard, Navy, Marines, and merchant seamen, but in the multinational cooperation of the Allies, the flags of which are flying behind me today. D-Day signified the strength and determination of the Allied forces and is a reminder to us all of the power of collaboration on a global scale. On June 6, 1944, such cooperation fostered a sense of unity that altered the course of the war, boosting Allied morale and leading to a final push into Germany. The impact was undeniable and immediate. Captain Joseph T. Dawson, who landed on D-Day with the 1st Infantry Division, said this decades later when reflecting on his participation in the liberation of Normandy. I have come to realize very deeply that that moment of D-Day marked a turning point. It was perhaps the most dramatic moment of the 20th century because it enabled the freedom of the world. There is something sacred about it. He was right. The Normandy landings ensured the destruction of Nazi tyranny, and it provided a second front vital to victory, lifting up those suffering from years of oppression. D-Day filled the world with hope and continued resolve. As the late author Stephen Ambrose once said, at the core, the American citizen soldier knew the difference between right and wrong, and they didn't want to live in a world in which wrong prevailed. So they fought and won, and we all of us, living and yet to be born, must be forever profoundly grateful. 4,427 gave their lives on D-Day to ensure that the ideals of what is right and just prevailed. Now each of us must ensure the same. That is the responsibility we have in the years ahead. This is how we honor their legacy. Along the same lines, during my own military career, I was encouraged by the saying that all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. I encourage you to walk among the exhibit on the East Lawn to see Faces of the Fallen, featuring photos of some of those good men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice 81 years ago and acted without hesitation to stand against evil. The young faces you see are a painful but necessary remembrance. With that focus central to today's program, we shall, as is our custom here, dispense with formal introductions of the speakers who follow me. Our intent in doing so is to focus attention on what is said rather than the person saying it. Finally, thank you for what you have done in keeping this memorial and their stories alive. Your commitment helps us pass on their legacies and preserves them for future generations. By your presence here today, you honor the men and women who not only paid the ultimate sacrifice in World War II, but those who lived to fight another day. Thank you for being here as we recognize their accomplishments, their service, and their sacrifice. Thank you.
Good morning. Governor Youngkin, General Ring, General Epperly, distinguished guests. And you know what? Everyone in the audience today is a distinguished guest too. I say this with genuine conviction because when you study D-Day as long as I have, and you observe with mounting concern how so many Americans in our society today understand little or even nothing of how the events of D-Day changed our lives, you come to appreciate those rare citizens like yourselves who take time out of their busy lives to demonstrate their reverence for our history, and in particular for those men who gave their all on D-Day 81 years ago today. So thanks for coming out to the memorial on such a beautiful day, in such a magnificent setting as this, to remember one of the greatest and most challenging moments in American history. You know, I think many of you in the audience, like me, are what American society has labeled baby boomers. Yes, you know who you are. The generation owing its entire existence to the defeat of the Axis powers and the return to civilian life of millions of GIs. A lot of marriages happened in a very short time, and we were the result. You baby boomers out there know the truth of what I'm about to say, and that is that most of our fathers never talked about their war experiences. Never. Not to their spouses, not to their parents, and most especially not to their children. The curious among us wondered why, and I, like many of you, certainly was curious. As an intrigued young kid during the centennial of the Civil War, I could only imagine what it might have been like to talk to Civil War veterans while standing on a little round top at Gettysburg or the Hornet's Nest at Shiloh, but it was too late. Much to my regret, Civil War veterans were all gone. Still, my long-suffering parents quenched my thirst for history by taking me to countless Civil War battlefields. By the way, I remember those trips mostly as solitary experiences. My mother rarely got out of the car after she saw signs warning visitors of snakes, while my father, a World War II veteran, seemed mostly bored and never once mentioned anything related to his wartime experiences, which were, let's face it, not that different than his Civil War counterparts. Over time, we baby boomers figured it out. Our fathers couldn't talk about the war because they knew only their wartime comrades could understand what needed to be said. It was as simple as that. No one would care, or so they thought. Unfortunately, by the time we baby boomers started to care, it was almost too late. Harriet Beecher Stowe, you know, the author of the famous novel Uncle Tom's Cabin, uttered a phrase that struck a nerve in my youth. She said, "The bitterest tears shed over graves are for words left unsaid." Anyone interested in joining the historical profession should recite those words every single day. Sometime in my mid-20s, I decided to put my money where my mouth was and bond with World War II veterans so they could find a voice the American public would finally hear. How I would accomplish that, I had absolutely no idea, but somehow it worked. By far the most important result of that effort were the hundreds of deep and long-lasting bonds forged with World War II vets, friendships that turned out to be the most meaningful of my life. But you know what? Sadly, save for one 105-year-old who lives just about a mile and a half from me now, they are all gone. A wise person once remarked that one doesn't realize one's good fortune until long after the moment has passed. How privileged I was that World War II veterans readily opened up their psyches to me, sometimes 30 or 40 years younger than themselves. I'm pretty sure they did this simply because I was a good listener, as all historians should be, and showed sympathy and understanding for their experiences. It didn't hurt that I spoke and understood the curious language of soldiers, so alien to civilians, because in my job as a National Guard historian, I was in the midst of uniformed people every single day. Over more than 40 years, I've hardly missed a reunion of the 29th Division, the unit that carried such a pivotal D-Day mission on Omaha Beach. At first, I was the only attendee at these reunions who was not a World War I or World War II veteran or a spouse of a veteran, the only one. At one of those reunions, I met the nicest guy in the world, a 29th Division D-Day vet from Roanoke named Bob Slaughter. Most of you know who he was, but if you don't, all you need to do is look around you to see the fruits of his labors. Bob had a gleam in his eye when I first met him, dreaming the impossible dream of creating this magnificent memorial in honor of the valorous service of the men from all nations who fought and sometimes died on D-Day. Part of that dream was to construct the memorial in this beautiful town we now occupy, Bedford, which tragically lost 19 of its sons on D-Day. It took 12 years for Bob's dream to come true, but there is no doubt in my mind that the reason we are all here today, everyone, is because of Bob Slaughter. His vision gave a voice to those who, for one reason or another, could not speak, and we should be eternally grateful to him for it. We really should. Indulge me for just one more minute as I tell you a story about Bob that was one of the most memorable moments of my life. In the summer of 2002, on the way home to Baltimore from a vacation, I called up Bob and asked if he'd like to get together for a short visit. Sure, he said, why don't we meet at Bedford at the memorial, which was less than 1 year old at the time. Boy, did he meet me. Exactly where I'm standing right now, 23 years ago. Bob and 6 of his Omaha Beach buddies greeted me, and I spent the next 3 hours talking D-Day history with the men who actually lived it. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, as that wise person once said, I didn't realize how lucky I was until long afterward. But when I reflect on that episode, I now know that for one brief shining moment, that simple dialogue with the men who represented the real flower of their generation made me the luckiest man on the face of the earth. So it bears repeating, I thank all of you for your devotion to our history. You're here. And if there is such a thing as a spirit of those who have come before us, I know they would thank you too. Take care. Enjoy the day. Before I go, please join me in welcoming the Honorable Glenn Youngkin, the Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Thank you.
Well, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. To all of you, welcome to Secretary Craig Crenshaw, to Rear Admiral Elpnitsky, and Major General Ring, to our esteemed veterans, and especially the 10 World War II heroes and your families that are here today. We are honored that you were here. To our distinguished guests, to my fellow Virginians, to my fellow Americans, and to all who wear the uniform of this great nation, thank you. Thank you for being here today. What an honor it is to be with you on these hallowed grounds, on this most important day at this most important memorial. A day where we come together to remember, to reflect, to pray, to honor, to pay tribute to the incredibly courageous Americans and allies who forever altered the course of history by laying down their lives on freedom's altar. 81 years have passed since the Allied Expeditionary Forces launched Operation Overlord. 81 years since the eyes of the world and the hopes and prayers of liberty-loving people everywhere were with the extraordinary, brave men, many of whom were barely old enough to graduate from high school. Men who embarked on the Great Crusade and formed a liberating force, the likes of which the world had never seen. 160,000 Allied troops, supported by nearly 7,000 naval vessels, 13,000 aircraft, 20,000 vehicles, 34,000 Americans came ashore at Omaha Beach. And with each passing year, as we have just heard, fewer and fewer of these heroic men are here to receive our thanks and to tell their story of a day that changed the world. Voices that we need to hear, voices to tell us the remarkable tales of valor, stories of, yes, a band of brothers sacrificing and suffering as one. And so it is fitting that we gather here today to honor the greatest generation who are here with us, who are here to keep alive the spirit, the true American spirit of these mighty heroes, to demonstrate our everlasting gratitude to those who gave their last full measure of devotion to the cause of liberty and freedom. And it is fitting that we gather here at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains here in Bedford. I know everyone knows Bedford. It's a small village. It's a small Virginia town that played such an outsized role in one of the greatest callings of mankind, a calling to fight the forces of fascism and to ensure that liberty will prevail. And because before they were the boys of Omaha Beach, they were the Bedford boys. 37 ordinary men who belonged to the extraordinary A Company of the 29th Blue and Gray Division's legendary 116th Infantry Regiment. Men who, along with other courageous Americans, as well as thousands upon thousands of Allied fighters, were part of one of the most daring and difficult military operations the world has ever witnessed. They were the boys who stormed the beaches and penetrated Hitler's Atlantic Wall, soldiers who scaled the mighty cliffs with hails of gunfire raining upon them, and also boys who descended into the valley of the shadow of death. One private first class said he became a visitor to hell when his boat landed on Omaha Beach. And when the German mortars stopped firing and the guns were silent and the smoke-filled skies cleared on that fateful June day, victory was won. And the Allied forces suffered over 10,000 casualties, and Americans had lost 2,500 of our own, over 2,500 of the bravest men to ever wear our country's uniform. And 20 of those souls lost. 20 came from here in Bedford, 19 from Company A, and 1 from Company F. In the wake of D-Day, this tight-knit community that believes in America, this tight-knit community which lives and breathes the values that we hold dear, bore an unbearable sacrifice. And taken together, Bedford was home to the single greatest loss of life per capita on D-Day of any place in America. It was down at Green's drugstore where the telegrams came in. Telegrams containing the names of the boys who would not return home to Bedford, but would otherwise be entering heaven as heroes. Names like Captain Taylor Fellers, one of the first to step off the Higgins boats and fall at Omaha Beach. Taylor died just 4 days before his 30th birthday, and he never returned home to his wife, Naomi. Names like Sergeant Earl Parker, who passed around a photograph of Danny, a newborn daughter that he had never held and that he never would. Names like Brothers Raymond and Bedford Hoback, whose gravesites I had the honor of visiting in Normandy. Raymond's story is remembered right here in the Death on Shore sculpture. A sculpture that depicts a falling soldier with a Bible beside him. A Bible that indeed made its way home to Bedford. The same Bible that teaches us things like the radical command to love one another like he loves us. Messages that there is no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friend. And the comforting hope and the confident promise that one day God will welcome us into a home not made with human hands. The Bedford boys did not want to be heroes. They wanted to do their duty, and they wanted to come home. But Providence had a different plan. Providence called these extraordinary men to sacrifice their lives for liberty, for our liberty, to draw their last breath defending our way of life, defending our shared values, defending the basic fabric of our nation. A fabric that needs to be woven tight by cohesive, close-knit communities like this one in Bedford. This is what the Bedford boys fought to defend. That is the legacy to which we are all heirs. And it is the legacy that we honor today. And as we prepare to celebrate next year America's 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, it is that legacy that we must see front and center again in each of our lives and in our nation. In this story, this American epic, D-Day must always, always be an honored chapter. On this June 6th, 2025, we honor this most important chapter by remembering these heroic men, by honoring their families, by reasserting our commitment to confront evil, to stand firm against the tyranny, the hate, the anti-Semitism that they fought to defeat. We must honor this most important chapter of this great country by recommitting ourselves to singing our national anthem loudly, by honoring our flag daily, and pledging our allegiance boldly. We honor this most important chapter by recommitting ourselves to defend the very principles of freedom and liberty that birthed our nation. We honor this most important chapter by teaching our children the values like honor and duty and patriotism, and to tell them the stories of the Bedford boys, the stories of those that were truly the very best among us. To honor the lives who died on D-Day by the manner by which we live our own today. D-Day marked the turning point of the war's European theater. And little less than a year later, the war in Europe would come to an end. And today we gather, now 80 years removed from the end of that great and terrible conflict. And as we look out into our future and consider what the next 80 years holds for our country, let us reaffirm the ties that bind us as Americans. Let us renew our commitment to the fierce patriotism of our heritage and pray that we will see a new birth of freedom. And let us redirect ourselves to the cause that the Bedford boys and so many others in the greatest generation died to defend. And whenever there is a need for inspiration, we can come here. We can come here to the National D-Day Memorial, and we can remember that freedom is never free. May God bless all of our veterans. May He bless our active duty military. May He bless all of their families. May He bless the Commonwealth of Virginia. And may He bless these great United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Youngkin, and thank you all for being here today. On February 3rd, 1941, members of Company H, 116th Infantry Regiment, 29th Division, reported to their Virginia National Guard Armory in Martinsville, Virginia, for what was supposed to be 1 year of active service. It turned out to be nearly 5. A heavy weapons company armed with water-cooled .30 caliber machine guns and 81 millimeter mortars, Company H trained there for more than a year and a half to prepare for its role in the opening phase for the D-Day invasion on 6 June 1944. Transported to the beach by 6 U.S. Navy landing crafts, Company H landed at H plus 30 minutes, 0700, along a half-mile front close behind 3 rifle companies, E, F, and G of the 2nd Battalion. Met by enemy machine gun, mortar, and artillery fire, Company H experienced heavy casualties as its soldiers struggled through the flooding surf and across the open tidal flat to the shingle embankment at the high water line. 30 minutes prior, Company A had landed in the first wave with devastating effects. Most now know the story of Bedford, which would lose 20 of its own on D-Day, 19 from Company A, 1 from Company F. Among Company H men was 19-year-old Arden Earl. In an interview by the Washington Post shortly before he died, Earl remembered with vivid clarity the scenes of that morning. As the ramp to their landing craft dropped, squad leader Noel Washburn called out, "Let's go." Earl was right behind him. Earl saw Washington rush forward and go down in the water. When he got up, I could see that he was hurt bad. Something had hit him all up and down the front of him. He went back down into the water and never got up. The men had been told that they couldn't stop, to keep moving, and so he struggled against the water. Amid the chaos, he came to a very young soldier crying for his mother. Earl remembered that he was just a kid and that it struck him that he didn't even look old enough to be there. The young soldier had had a mental break. He was crying for his mother to come home and take him there. Earl noted that he tried to talk to him, saying, "Buddy, your mother is 6,000 miles away. We have to move." The young man would not move. Knowing he had orders to keep going, he had to leave the young man, and they had to push forward. As he did so, an artillery shell exploded nearby, peppering Earl with shrapnel. A medic quickly patched him up. It was among this chaos of battle that the men of Company H fought and where many of them died. Men like William Cowan from Connecticut and 19-year-old William Crawley from Tennessee, and 34-year-old Sergeant Ivor Darrell Thornton of Martinsville, Virginia. He was last seen wading ashore, perhaps near Arden Earl and Noel Washburn. Exactly what happened to Ivor Thornton will perhaps always remain a mystery, but thanks to the work of the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, DPAA, we are much closer to knowing today. Thornton's body was never recovered. His parents endured the painful news of him missing in action and eventually the dreaded news that he would not be coming home. Yet they never received his remains for a proper burial, at least not for the next 81 years. According to the DPAA, on June 8, 1944, grave registration personnel recovered a set of remains from Omaha Beach that they were unable to identify. They interred those remains in the U.S. Cemetery, St. Laurent-sur-Mer, adjacent to Omaha Beach, and designated them X-159. Grave registration personnel attempted to identify X-159 in March 1945, but they could not associate the body with a specific casualty. In June 1947, analysts with the American Graves Registration Command were also unable to identify X-159. On March 3, 1945, it was recommended the remains be declared unidentifiable. Time moved on. Thornton's name was etched into the wall of the missing at the Normandy American Cemetery in Colville-sur-Mer, a solemn tribute to the countless soldiers whose remains were never recovered. Hopeful signs appeared several years ago, however, when it was believed that X-159 might be the identity of a Bedford boy whose name was also on the tablets of the missing in Normandy. Thanks to the help of Ken and Linda Parker with the Company A Bedford Boys Tribute Center, a great deal of time and research, and with the help of the Thornton family and the family of the missing Bedford boy, in September 2023, the Department of Defense and American Battle Monuments Commission exhumed the remains of X-159 and transferred them to the DPAA laboratory for analysis. Through advanced testing methods as well as mitochondrial DNA analysis, the identity of the remains were confirmed as belonging to Ivor D. Thornton. He would finally come home. Men like Arden Earl survived June the 6th, but not without the devastating realization that many from their company would not. For Arden Earl, as he walked across Omaha Beach on D-Day +1, he saw a disturbing sight: dead soldiers who had washed up on the shore. Among them was the young, scared soldier he had tried to console, who was calling out for his mother. Earl noted that God had come and taken him home. His mother could not. Company H lost 18 men on June 6, 1944. Thornton was among them. His mother, too, had been unable to take him home, yet now, 81 years later, his family can. Today, during the wreath laying, Ken and Linda Parker of the Bedford Boys Tribute Center will lay roses at the spot on the wall here at the National D-Day Memorial that lists his name, plaque W3, Ivor D. Thornton. We are thankful he is home. Thank you.
Please be seated. Today, on the 81st anniversary of D-Day, the National Day Memorial pays tribute to the valor, fidelity, and sacrifice of all those who have fought on June 6, 1994, as well as those who continue to fight in the days, weeks, and months that followed. Imagine for a moment that you are an American soldier fighting in eastern France in the fall of 1944. For weeks, you have been marching and fighting, and your supplies are nearly gone. You are dangerously low on ammunition, on rations, and on medical supplies. The tanks are supporting you are nearly out of fuel, and your trucks and jeeps need spare parts. You need socks, new boots, and your wounded comrades need to be evacuated. Now imagine how you would feel seeing a fleet of trucks coming over the hillside. They carry K-rations for your hungry men, bandages and morphine for your medics, and even mail for home to boost your morale. Tankers have much needed fuel to fill up empty tanks and jeeps. You stop and breathe a sigh of relief for the arrival of the Red Ball Express, a group often overlooked heroes who did their part to help win the war. Logistics wins war in the modern age, and World War II proved it. The vast industrial power of the United States and Britain was meaningless if the frontline soldiers could not get bullets, bandages, and beans he needed to fight. In France, in 1944, infrastructures like rail lines had been destroyed, and the farther the troops got from beaches of Normandy, the longer and more challenging the supply lines grew. From this dire need came the Red Ball Express. Named after an old railroad term for a nonstop express train, the Red Ball Express was a seemingly endless river of trucks carrying war-winning supplies to the front. The beloved Deuce and a Half was the workhorse of the Red Ball, but larger tractor trailers and fuel tankers were also employed. The challenges of supplying a rapid-moving front were daunting, and yet the Red Ball drivers got the job done, moving more than 400,000 tons of supplies during the official duration of the Red Ball from August to November in 1944, often breaking a few traffic and speed regulations along the way. Although not considered frontline combat soldiers, Red Ball personnel nevertheless often found themselves under fire at the front or even behind enemy lines. The vital service of these drivers earned the appreciation and the great respect of the American fighting man, from the lowest private to the highest brass. And it cannot be forgotten that in an army marked by segregation, approximately 75% of the Red Ball drivers were African Americans. A generation after World War II, Colonel John S.D. Eisenhower, a veteran of the European War and son of the Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, wrote, "The spectacular nature of the advance through France was due as great a measure to the men who drove the Red Ball trucks as to those who drove the tanks. Without it, the advance across France could not have been made." Today, with this dedication of a narrative plaque commemorating the vital role of the Red Ball Express, of which I am honored to take part of, the National D-Day Memorial would like to express sincere thanks to Rick and Candy Scruggs for underwriting the plaque and helping to preserve this significant part of the D-Day story. On behalf of all of us here today, thank you for ensuring their story is remembered and passed on for generations to come.
Good afternoon. It is an honor to be with you here today as we gather in remembrance of the continued profound gratitude on this, the 81st anniversary of D-Day. I have visited Normandy many times over the years, and I'm always struck by what was achieved on that day by a determined few who changed the course of history. This date remains a cornerstone in modern history, but also to the testament and courage and a pivotal moment for the freedom and democracy around the globe. For those who served during World War II, they made it possible for the freedoms we enjoy in our generation and the generations that followed them and for the generations yet to come. As we commemorate the 81st anniversary of D-Day, let us reaffirm our commitment to those veterans, to honoring their legacy of those who served, who fought, and who sacrificed for the freedoms we so readily enjoy. It is now my distinct privilege to introduce to you 10 of our distinguished World War II veterans that honor us with their presence here today. As I read each of their names, they will cross the bridge behind me to be recognized by the governor. We are indebted to their service and are grateful for their attendance as we reflect over the 16 million men and women who served during World War II for the cause of freedom. Mr. Jack Cassell, United States Navy. Jack enlisted in the Navy and shipped out for basic training as the news of the Normandy invasion was breaking on June 6, 1944. An excellent typist, thanks to his mother's insistence that he learn. He was stationed at the Norfolk Naval Base Air Station doing clerical work, a fact that he said kept him out of combat but also out of the kitchen. He saw further service in Korea conflict, and later he served as a naval recruiter in Roanoke, retiring as a lieutenant commander. Mr. Jack Cassell, we thank you for your service. Mr. Richard Inlow II, United States Navy. Mr. Inlow served in the 33 Seabees as a carpenter's mate, second class, aboard the aircraft carrier U.S. Tarawa. Mr. Inlow participated in the savage invasion of Peleliu, often described as hell on earth, in 1944. Mr. Inlow and the Seabees with whom he served were in the midst of it all, unloading cargo onto the beach, constructing a bomber base while under fire, which was operational in 7 days, and working on the roads and infrastructure to support the troops. Mr. Inlow, thank you for your service. Mr. James Joseph Jefferson, United States Navy. Mr. Jefferson served as an electronics technician mate, third class, aboard the destroyer USS Breckinridge in the Pacific. In the rapidly developing field of Navy electronics, he helped service that new technology being developed for the war. Mr. Jefferson, we thank you for your distinguished service, sir. Miss Ada Hostler Kuhn, Women's Army Corps. Miss Kuhn served in the WACs in the U.S. as well as in the European theater, working in a motor pool in Newport News before deploying to France and later to Frankfurt and Berlin. She was not only the hero in her family, her brother was killed in Europe on D-Day +7. Thank you for your family's sacrifice and for your service. Mr. Marion Knoll, United States Navy. Mr. Knoll served as a motor mechanic's mate, 3rd class, aboard LST 779, including 2 tours to Iwo Jima and Okinawa. LST 779 was the first LST to beach on the Iwo Jima shores on D+1 on February 20th, 1945, and unloaded much-needed howitzers onto Green Beach. The landing ship also supplied the flag that made famous by Joe Rosenthal's epic photo of the flag rising over Mount Suribachi. Later, LST 779 is thought to have been the last vessel to have seen the USS Indianapolis before it was sunk by a Japanese submarine. Thank you, Mr. Knoll, for your service. Mr. Ralph Theodore Bud Seiss, United States Army. Mr. Seiss served from 1942 to 1946 in the United States Army as a technician and a mechanic on communications equipment, including critical teletype machines, which played a vital role in communication throughout the war. Mr. Seiss, we thank you for your distinguished and technical service. Mr. Dan Valaria, United States Marine Corps. Mr. Valaria enlisted in the United States Marine Corps as soon as he was old enough and served in the occupation of Europe after the war. He helped clear the Mediterranean islands. His unit was also sent to the Middle East as peacekeepers during the Arab-Israeli War of 1948. After his service, he served as a police officer in Washington, D.C., and today still helps educate student visitors here at the National D-Day Memorial. Mr. Valario, we thank you, sir, for your distinguished service. Mr. Clarence Bill Wenzel, United States Navy. Mr. Wenzel enlisted in the Navy at the age of 17 and trained to become a naval aviator. Following in the footsteps of his older sister, who served as a WASP, as the Women's Air Force service pilot, and brother who flew P-47 Thunderbolts, Mr. Wenzel served aboard the aircraft carrier USS Tarawa in the Pacific Theater. He joined the United States Navy Reserve right out of college in March of 1944 and spent 26 weeks in pre-flight training at the University of North Carolina to earn his pilot's wings. During his distinguished service, he made 72 carrier landings with no wave-offs. Mr. Wenzel, thank you for your distinguished service. Mr. Henry Bud Mason, Jr., United States Navy. Mr. Mason served with 2 units in the Seabees, the 134th and the 144th Construction Battalions in Guam all the way to the end of the war. And he was discharged from the Navy as a seaman first class in August of 1946. He faithfully served in the Navy Reserves for an additional 8 more years. Mr. Mason, we thank you for your distinguished service. Mr. Roderick Lewis Edwards, Sr., United States Navy. Mr. Edwards served in the Pacific Theater in the liberation of the Philippines in particular. He is the son of a Purple Heart recipient from World War I, and he has 4 brothers who served in the Army, the youngest of whom was wounded in Korean conflict. Mr. Edwards, we thank you for your distinguished service.
Hello, sir. Bless you. Thank you for coming today. I know it's a big lift. It's hot out here, so thank you for being here. You're inspiring all of us.
Ladies and gentlemen, please join me again in another round of applause for these incredible men and women of our greatest generation. We are indebted to them all.
As you're able, please remain standing for a prayer of dedication and of benediction. Let us pray. Almighty God, we reunite our hearts in prayer of thanksgiving on this day, thankful for the men and women who served during World War II, served in subsequent conflicts, and even those who toil today in freedom's cause. Grant us grace to understand why they wore the uniform and to cherish what they labored to protect, so that we, in humility and gratitude, will walk worthy of their legacy, a legacy of liberty. We think especially today of the unheralded service of the men of the Red Ball Express, performing necessary service which brought them great peril but little fame, yet which contributed mightily to victory in World War II. As we dedicate our newest plaque to their memory, help us to preserve their story well and to learn from it. Let us never be found indifferent to the heritage of our forebears, apathetic to the sacrifices of those who die in freedom's cause, or negligent in sustaining the loved ones of those who give their lives in service to our beloved nation. Bless each one here. Bless and sustain our veterans, and dismiss us with your blessings as we proclaim, God bless the Commonwealth of Virginia, and God bless America. Amen.